Insights on nefarious verbal codes. Vertical heights versus vertical depths. After so many months of literally vanishing from this writing scene, I have decided to recommence the writing. It is a very difficult proposition to put to practice. However, I fear that if I do not put so many things into words, the insights might never come into the open.
Some more than 1 month back, I had recommenced my writing in the local vernacular.
As I had mentioned earlier, my readers do not dare to share my writings. Everyone fears that sharing the contents would affect their own personal relationship with others.
For the writings generally touch upon the raw nerve spots of South Asian human relationships through speech. Since recommencing the vernacular writing, I have inadvertently started upon writing on the various nefarious verbal codes in the local language, going a bit deeper than I have done earlier. I am going to translate the vernacular contents into English and write them here.
However, I do not know how much successful this attempt would be, for it is practically an attempt to transfer a three-dimensional communication model into a two-dimensional space. Since it is a translation, I will need to follow the original text to some extent. I do not have the time or mental space to write an original text here.
The officials of the English East India Company did not receive any direction from the members of their director board to transform the social systems of Malabar and South Asia.
However, the English officials who came to reside in Tellicherry came to see that the place was full of terrible injustices of various kinds. They tried to remove the various injustices by means of creating laws and judicial
Setups.
It is more or less sure that these steps would end up in failure. It can be clearly seen that there was a lot of relatively superior social living conditions
In the England of those times.
The reason for this was not that there were a lot of laws and judicial setups there.
There were a number of feudal lords who owned a lot of land property in England.
The same was the situation in Malabar also. For instance, over here in Devarkovil, where I live, there were at least 5 small-time feudal landlords in the nearby vicinity.
Among them, I am aware that one had 3,350 acres of land in those days.
The other feudal landlord families also had similar amounts of land. A huge number of extremely poor families lived under this family as their working class. This I had seen for myself up to the 1970s. After that, the Gulf influence changed everything. In the olden days, there were persons who did the farming. Under them, there would be slaves who practically were seen as domestic cattle, bonded to the small pieces of land in which they lived in flimsy huts. Now let me speak of the coding in the verbal codes in the language.
Varying kinds of similes and illustrative examples might be required to demonstrate the extremely complicated design codes in a local feudal language. I have already written a lot about the Satanism in feudal languages elsewhere.
In Malabar, the communication code between individuals is like this: Ingal, Inhi, that is higher you, lower you.
Ingal is the big man and Inhi is the person on the lower stature.
On first impression, one might feel that the connection between human beings in this hierarchical setup is similar to that in the English army. However, that is not the way in which it is. Let us look at an illustrative sample situation in the Indian police. Number 1, 50-year-old sub-inspector. Number 2, under him, 45-year-old assistant sub-inspector. Number 3, under him, 40-year-old head constable. Number 4, under him, constables of age varying between 24 and 35.
Person on layer number 1 addresses the person on layer number 2 with an Inhi.
Lowest you. At the same time, the person on the layer number 2 addresses the person on the layer number 1 as Ingal.
Highest you.
So this is the relationship coding: Ingal, Inhi.
This coding moves in the very same manner downwards, creating an Ingal Inhi step in the ladder at each level. That means the persons who are at the rock bottom of this communication system are the persons who occupy the lowest step in the Ingal Inhi ladder. Just like that, the person who is on the topmost layer is the person who occupies the highest step in the Ingal Inhi ladder.
This is a phenomenon that is not there in English at all. That is, some persons are on the rock bottom of a very deep communication canyon, and some others on the cloud-touching heights of some towering mountain peak. What has to be understood here is that this social communication linking creates various kinds of terrible cravings, limitations, hostilities, competitiveness, desire to degrade others, and such other things connected to extremely complicated emotional oscillations and physical postures. There is need to mention so many things connected to these things. I need to stop my writing here for the time being. What has been written now is just the vanguard of what is in the offing.